All right, by now you've probably watched a few of our videos, live streams, things like that about EV tax credits and the updates as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, Justin, let's get into the 3 things that you think are the worst changes as a result of these new EV tax credits. What's number 1 on your list?
After about 12 years of wishing for a used EV tax credit or incentive of some form from the federal government, they are introducing a used EV credit in about the worst way possible. It's a $4,000 incentive. That's not the bad part. $4,000 is all right for a used EV, but here's where the problem lies. There's a $25,000 cap on the price of the used electric vehicle. There are not many EVs on the road today that are under $25,000 used. I mean, you might find a Chevy Bolt with 75,000 miles on it for $25,000. You might find a Nissan Leaf or two, if you can find them, because there's such a shortage right now. That's an issue with me, and also the fact that there's only one incentive per taxpayer every 3 years. Take those into consideration, and it's going to be a lot harder for households to electrify quickly.
And let's also keep in mind here, unlike prior EV tax incentives that we had that weren't capped by a period of time, they were capped by the number of vehicles sold by the manufacturer. This is for a 10-year period. These EV tax credits would run through 2032, correct?
Yes, 10 years.
So you're telling me that they expect used EV prices to be under $25,000, they being our government, under $25,000, and I don't know, this year, let alone 10 years from now, when generally speaking, everything's going to simply be more expensive, inflation, right?
Yeah.
It happens. This makes no sense to me. This one makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, there should have been like an inflation clause built into this, but we read the text and no such thing.
All right, what about number 2, the second thing that you think is the worst change as a result of these EV tax incentives?
The timeline is ridiculous. I think the bill has good intentions. We all want to build a domestic supply chain for battery production, for EV production. We want to create jobs here in the U.S. That's all great, but the timeline doesn't make sense. Recently, analysts at Benchmark Minerals said that in a best-case scenario, it could take up to 5 years for any automakers to fully meet the requirements of this new bill. The timeline says that as soon as the bill is signed into law, 40% of battery minerals for an EV must be sourced in the United States or in countries that we have free trade agreements with. Also, 50% of battery components must be assembled here in the U.S. or the countries we just mentioned with free trade agreements. That's going to be Mexico, Canada, Chile, Argentina, Australia. That's about it. The rest don't really have anything to do with EV production. That timeline where you're going to be looking at these rules taking effect later this year, maybe even just a month from now, that's way too quick for automakers to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we obviously don't know where all of the components come from when you make a vehicle or make a battery and things like that. But you don't have to look that hard into the research to realize that a lot of it comes from China. And so it's likely that most of these automakers are relying heavily on China to source these goods. They don't have relationships set up. And maybe even the countries that you just mentioned that we have free trade agreements with don't even have the infrastructure in place or the corporations in place to be able to provide the materials. A lot of this right now comes from China. And obviously this is a push to get us away from that, domestically away from that. But like you said, the timeline, that's like even more aggressive than the timelines I pitch. And I get told I move too fast.
Yeah, I've got a catchy slogan for you, Zach.
Huh.
You ready for it? Geopolitics doesn't dictate geology. Okay? The fact that China is technically one of these entities of foreign concern that the United States government has defined, that doesn't change the fact that China has a lot of the lithium, cobalt, and other minerals that are needed for battery production. So yeah, geopolitics does not dictate geology.
Yeah, we should make some merch. I'm just saying maybe the first YAA Electric merch drop will be exactly that.
Looking for a car? Look no further than joinyaa.com. Go check out the cars listed there. There's no BS, no lead gen forms, no anything. Just cars.
What is the third thing that you think was maybe a bit of an oversight or, I'm going to stick with the theme, worst thing to come out of these EV tax credits?
Anyone who glances at automotive headlines would know that additional dealer markups, dealers just jacking up the price of cars because they can. That's a problem right now for affordability of transportation in America, and they failed to see this problem coming. I mean, they didn't even fail to see it coming. They failed to notice it happening right now. Everything in the electric vehicle tax revision is going to be based on MSRP, and I think dealers are going to take advantage of that.
Not only will dealers take advantage of that, but the automakers will likely take advantage of that as well. Wouldn't be surprised if we see. Remind me, Justin, it's $55,000 for sedans is the price point that you have to be below, and what was it, $75,000 or $85,000 for SUVs and trucks and vans?
Yeah, $55,000 for sedans and $80,000 for SUVs, trucks, and vans.
Are we not just going to see a bunch of automakers price things right below those thresholds, then only to allow dealerships to add additional dealer markups, addendum labels, market adjustments, so on and so forth? So I think okay, I don't want to say never. I think a lot of folks will realize that ultimately what's going to happen here is they found ways to save money on buying their EV, only for corporations to find ways to make money because they're saving that money buying the EV. This is government dollars going into the pockets of automakers and car dealers.
Yeah, and I think there's some unintended consequences here from their failure to see the problem of additional dealer markups, because who doesn't have dealer markups? It's the direct-to-consumer automakers. And who's the biggest among those? Tesla. This bill may eventually benefit Tesla the most, ironically, because Tesla's not, involved with many of these government discussions at all. But you're going to start to see those who don't have to worry about dealer markups having somewhat of an advantage. More consumers might want to go the Tesla route or the Lucid route or the Rivian route if they don't have to worry about dealer markups.
Something tells me we might do another video titled The Biggest Winners and Losers as a result of these new EV tax credits, but stay tuned. You'll see that on the channel sometime in the future. Justin, thanks for running through these top 3 worst things to come out of some really good news, which is revised EV tax credits. It's fascinating, winners and losers.
Yeah, just remember the takeaway. It's complicated.
And that geopolitics does not dictate geology. I freaking love that.
Yeah, it's on a shirt.